Welcome to Crimson Clues, where shadows hide secrets and silence reveals the truth. Every story is a puzzle, and every clue takes you closer to the answer. Subscribe now, join the hunt, and let the mystery begin. Chapter 1. A Box of Green Silk. To an Englishman with a modest imagination and a well-brushed hat, London society in the spring of 1938 seemed like a field of crocuses, bright, fragile, and pretending not to notice the snow still hiding in Europe's hedge. One experienced optimism at lunch and apprehension at evening, and both were served from the same source. Poe, who believes that the British Empire is a vast country house in need of a competent cleaner, decided to combat international chaos by ordering chocolate. We sat at a little table beneath the chandelier at the Ritz, where boxes painted envy and violets were heaped into pyramids that would have made the pharaohs reconsider their ambitions. A young woman in black held a silver tray of samples as if presenting evidence. "Observe, Hastings," said Poirot, "how the English bury their passions in cellophane. To express deep feelings, one ties a ribbon instead of saying them." "You are quite unjust," I remarked. "A box of chocolates is a polite gesture." Poirot selected a dark square with tweezers and stated, "Abia. Then society requires foresight." He sniffed it with sacerdotal heaviness. "Oranges and almonds, a happy marriage for both families." The appearance of Lady Rosamond Delon, whose entrances had been trained since her christening, saved me from more allegory. She was one of those women that looked good even in the morning, which I have found to be as uncommon as it is unsettling. Her sable collar suggested that April was still January. Pearls lay on her throat as if judgments had already been made. What fortunate for Mou Poirot and Captain Hastings. "I was told you were here." She spoke quickly and confidently, as if she had never had to knock twice. "You must arrive at once." Poe raised a polite questioning eyebrow. "It is Margaret," Lady Rosand remarked, dropping her voice. "Margaret Linton is Sir Alistair's wife. There has been terrible business. She is currently with me upstairs." Sir Alistair Linton was one of those little pillars on whom the larger pillars rely and seldom credit. Chairman of something important and boring at Admiral Ty, as well as an expert on the types of wireless transmissions that no ordinary person receives. His wife Margaret had been a fixture on the more agreeable charitable committees, musical, tasteful, and a little bashful in front of large crowds. Poirot asked, "What kind of business is this, madam?" Lady Rosamond shuddered as she looked about the room, despite the fact that it was warm. "Poison," she explained. Poirot set down his tweezers with the air of a guy whose most intimate joke had been told aloud. "Ah," he replied softly, "let's go." They reserved a private sitting room on the first floor. Margaret Linton slept on the sofa, with the awful stillness of people who have spent the night finding that life, for all its decency, is still savage. Her complexion, usually delicate, was as transparent as porcelain when exposed to light. A nurse stood by carrying a travel case and the brisk tiredness that distinguishes the competent. Miss Judith Vale, Margaret's younger sister, sat beside the hearth, pale, alert, and angry at herself for being terrified. Between them on the low table was a square hat-box made of pale cream cardboard and tied with a band of green silk. "Margaret," Lady Rosamond spoke softly. "I've brought Miss Poirot," Margaret said, opening her eyes. "That is very kind of you," she said quietly. "I'm a little dumb today." "Not at all," Poirot said, grasping her hand. "You are a woman who has shown courage and now needs chocolate. That isn't foolishness. It's arithmetic," she nearly smiled. The nurse let out a tiny cough. "Mrs. Linton is resting comfortably. The doctor has provided an emetic and bismuth. I sent a specimen to be analyzed." She looked at the box with professional disdain. "Sir, I would appreciate it if no one touched the remains." Poirot cocked his head and drew up a chair for himself and another for me. "You will tell me what happened." "Yes, the minor things, the details that do not quite fit, are the ones that reveal." Judith Vale talked before her sister did. "The parcel arrived at 8 p.m. last night, addressed to Margaret in an unfamiliar handwriting. There was a small card tucked beneath the ribbon." She looked at the mantle. Lady Rosamond produced a visiting card and handed it to Poirot with a hint of disgust as if it would bite. It was a woman's hand, beautiful and practiced. "With my love for you and the young one." See, Margaret's gaze had drifted to a small framed portrait upon the writing table. A baby girl, approximately 18 months old, is solemn with the somnolence that babies develop when photographers say, "Smile." She noticed the direction of my eyes. Alice Dister is very proud, she explained. We are both very proud. Poirot inspected the envelope. The postmark is Berkeley Square, remarked Judith. It may have been displayed on the corner of the street. And the box itself, Poirot replied. He leaned forward without touching. He looked at the knot, the bow, and how the silk flattened at the corners. He took in the tiniest breath. Fortnum's carry such a ribbon, he said. However, this is not Fortnum's tissue paper. Check the watermark. A private confectioner or a department store that doesn't know when to be modest. Lady Rosamond clasped her hands. I advised her not to open it at once. But Margaret suggested it may be from the Symphony Fund. There is some nonsense about a gift in kind, Margaret responded gently. That was very silly. Judith told me to wait. I've had a lot of notes and whatnot this week. I realized, I thought everything kindly. You were right to think that, Poirot replied gravely. It is the sender who did wrong. Judith continued briskly, as do individuals who want to escape their fears. We were 3 in the drawing room, Rosund, Margaret, and me. The males were in the smoking room downstairs. I cut the ribbon. She blushed. I do not know why that feels important. Poirot, who unties a ribbon, emphasizes the need of revealing herself. And within, beautiful blue paper as lovely as a summer dress. 2 layers separated by a card labeled assorted creams. They appeared totally ordinary. Margaret ate one of the darks, followed by one of the pale. I grabbed half a pale one, lemon, I believe. Rosamond took a sip of cherry and declared she'd be okay. Margaret stated 10 minutes later that she felt quite queer. The nurse intervened. Mrs. Linton suffered from nausea and dizziness, and her pulse was erratic. Miss Vale complained of slight burning in the throat and heaviness in the extremities. Her stomach was cleaned, as was Mrs. Linton's. Her mouth tightened in disdain. If only people would stop eating stuff delivered by mail. Margaret instantly noticed a smell, not of chocolate, but of something very faint, like a drawer full of old gloves. Poirot's eyes brightened. You have a nose, madame. It's helpful. I admit that the mention of gloves astonished me. Pooh grabbed a tiny leather folder from his pocket and jotted down a note with the neatness of a guy who organizes his ideas alphabetically. And your husband? He inquired. Alistair appeared at once, remarked Lady Rosand. He telephoned Sir Thomas, our man. Judith wanted the cups. I encouraged her, but Alice Dister begged for silence till morning. Her delicate hesitation, it was not unkind. He dislikes headlines. Hatlines, Poirot mumbled. They are a sort of poison also. He turned the visiting card between his fingers and thumb. This see. You have a friend who would sign, so Judith's face shaded. Margaret explained that she is not surrounded by C's. Neither am I. There's Lady Caroline Hawtrey, but she won't send sweets without a footman and a flourish. Margaret looked aside. There's Cora Blount, she replied quietly. We were at school together. Lady Rosamond made a little annoyed noise. Cora never sends anything, unless it causes difficulty. Poirot addressed Madame Blount. She is, how do you say, modern, Lady Rosamond stated with impartiality, and a hint of frostiness that she was divorced. She's also trendy. And is she, Poirot asked softly, in love? There was a slight pause. The foreign correspondent, Judith, grudgingly answered, with Julian d'Herval. He has been friendly to everyone. He is also an imbecile, which hasn't stopped him. I offered, eager to say something constructive, that the Times had published one of his columns the previous week. Yes, Judith replied dryly. He spelled Yugoslavia correctly twice. Margaret's hands had clutched together, then released. She peered at the green ribbon on the table with curiosity, as if it would rise and talk. Carr has known Julian for years, she explained. Alice Dister and I invited him to dinner, as one would. He is humorous, while Cora is decorative. She and I aren't friends in the sense that matters when the room is empty. Poirot nodded, as one might to a small exact truth, and the nurse, he said, would not touch the fragments. Bong, we'll look with our eyes, not our fingertips. He rose to examine the box more closely. Hastings, take note. The inside paper is hand-cut. Note the small diagonal where the scissors pulled. A shop does not do this when it has been paid. When a person is worried, she pulls the knot or right loop tighter than the left. A right-handed woman tightened it too quickly. Are you suppose a woman, then? I said. Pooh's moustaches curled for private delight. I guess nothing. I place probabilities on a plate, mon ami, and ask which one refuses to sit still. Sir Alistair Linton arrived after hearing a knock, as he is accustomed to doors that open on cue. He wasn't a gorgeous man, but he had the kind of face that absorbs and retains essential knowledge. His gaze shifted first to his wife, then to the newcomers, summarizing and discarding us with a single professional glance. "Margaret," he said, "it is well." Poirot gently replied, "He has been brave. It will be required to be brave once again." Sir Alistair examined the box. "My wife has been ill," he explained, as if speaking to a committee. "The doctor has recommended that we relax." His gaze narrowed. "Who are you?" Poirot spoke en Omisard in a polite manner. "Someone who is concerned with what is important to them." Sir Alistair's expression changed, due to a sense of recognition. "The Belgian, I see." His tone was not inviting. "There is no need for advertisements. On the contrary, Poirot stated that when someone receives an anonymous present, advertising has already begun. It just comes down to whether we or the newspaper man writes the notice." Sir Alistair's jaw had hardened. "This is a private subject." Poirot explained that poison rarely stays private for long. For a little moment, the immovable pillar and the small man exchanged uncomfortably close looks. Margaret was responsible for preventing the collision. "Alistair," she murmured softly, "I asked Lady Rosamond to bring Mu Puo." "I'd be grateful." Sir Alistair breathed. "Very good," his voice lowered. "Please keep it quiet." Poirot bowed, as if he had accepted a contract to reorganize a drawing room. "Discretion," he said, "is his preferred language." He gently pointed at the card on the mantel. "Perhaps you will allow me to photograph this. The police will do it tomorrow, but I want to be ahead of the curve." The nurse, who had the practical thinking of her trade, said she'd send a kid for a camera right away. Poe meanwhile examined the ribbon more closely, bringing his face so close that I worried about his mustaches. He whispered, "Perfume. Not the chocolate, the silk. A ghost from Gardenia. Curious, Judith began in April, when violets are popular in London. Carora wears an absurd scent, something foreign which I would not like to accuse her of." Poirot refused to accuse anyone. "Take notice at all times." He straightened and turned to face Margaret. "Madame, please excuse one more question. Were there any more letters in yesterday's post that did not belong?" Margaret closed her eyes, considered, and then opened them again. "There was a foreign stamp," she explained. "Italy. I believe Alistair offers a lot of that sort of material. Conferences, fellows writing about radios. I left it for him." Sir Alistair's focus moved almost subtly. Poirot didn't pursue it. He has a habit of putting such things on a shelf in his head and leaving them there until they accumulate their own dust. "Then we're done for the hour," Poirot said. "The suites are taken to the laboratory. We will photograph the ribbon and also leave the card. We will only contact the retailer that sold this box. Hastings Monrav, you and I will meet a woman who ties bows for a living. She will explain the difference between kindness and murder." Lady Rosamond rose with us and led us down the corridor. She muttered, "Do you think she will die?" Poirot stared past her, to the pale April light that had unintentionally entered the windows. He suspected that someone had tried to make a decision for her. "English women are stubborn, Lady Rosamond. I propose that she will refuse." We descended the steps into the lobby, where London revolved exquisite and determined to remain so. Outside, taxis urinated steam onto Piccadilly, and a newspaper boy yelled in a voice that had never learnt to whisper. Poirot hesitated at the revolving door, tilting his head. "The English," he said, "they say little and suspect nothing. The Continentals talk a lot and distrust everything. Me, I prefer to smell the ribbon." He smiled. "Come, Hastings, we'll go to Fortnum's and ask a young woman who knows how ladies lie. After that, perhaps pay a visit to Mrs. Cororab Blount." "And if she is innocent," I said. Poirot's eyes became quite kind. "Then she'll be intelligent enough to persuade me. If she is guilty, she will be intelligent enough to try." He pushed the door with one gloved hand and stepped into the morning, little and precise and somehow sufficient to the size of the metropolis. Chapter 2. The Perfume of Jealousy. In London, commerce is frequently a sort of confession. If you wish to discover the truth about a lady, you will learn more from her milliner than from her book. Poole, who has never believed that sins go unpunished, elected to start at Fortnum and Mason. At 10 o'clock we entered the bottom floor. Behind the mahogany counters spread a polite Eden of ribbon, chocolate and glass. The air was cold and fragrant with candied violets. Puss, who appeared to be directing a symphony no one else could hear, paused in front of the confectionery counter, where a 19-year-old salesgirl straightened bows with the concentration of a surgeon. "Mademoiselle," he continued earnestly, "we seek enlightenment on the topic of ribbon." She blinked. "So what about the ribbon?" "Green silk, one in double-faced, sold last week for chocolate wrapping. A lady may have ordered a little length and asked for a bow to be tied." The girl examined him before turning to consult a ledger. "We sell a lot of that shade, sir. Do you have a sample?" Poe produced the surviving ribbon tail, which had been sealed in paper by the nurse. The girl spread it on the counter. "Oh yes, that is ours. Do you see the salvage that was imported from Lyon?" But she paused. "We didn't tie the bow ourselves. We used double knots that crossed left over right. This one is the opposite." "Someone retied it." Poe tilted his head. "You have the eye of an artist. Please allow me to ask one more question. This paper is not ours. Ours is embossed. This is plain, but the box resembles Harrod's former style. Before Christmas, we had a lady bring one in to have it refilled." Poirot replied softly. "A lady? Do you remember her?" "Of course. She was fastidious about her chocolates, which were only dark creams and contained no nuts. She wanted them arranged in 2 layers, with a card in between. I remember because she requested blue paper. An odd option. We had run out. What did she take instead?" "Pale green," the girl replied quickly, "and she used her own ribbon. Paid in cash." Poirot's mustaches twitched with pleasure. "You've given us a start, mademoiselle. If you want to leave ribbon for any reason, please contact me." We departed with a description. Middle height, fair and well-dressed, around 35. The girl had added the perfume of gardenia as an afterthought. Outside, the rain had begun with English precision. The taxi drivers had already become philosophical about it. So it was Cora Blount. I stated that it must be. Patience Hastings. A name is a hypothesis, not a conclusion. We only have the perfume, which is a very democratic clue. Half of Mayfair's women bathe in it. Cora Blount lived in one of those small, exquisite flats off Park Lane where everything was predetermined by someone else. When she greeted us, she wore a gown that matched the color of her cigarette smoke and an expression that had been practiced. "Mr. Poirot," she announced. "How dramatic. Are you looking into my morals or my chocolates?" "Pabou," Poirot replied, bowing. "The one may explain the other." She laughed. "You think I sent that little box to Margaret Linton? My dear man, I send flowers, not calories. Have you heard about the affair?" "Everything London has." She sank into a chair and crossed her ankles with the poise of a woman who understands how valuable her ankles are. "Poor Margaret. I suppose she will recover. She has the constitution of a saint and the luck of a sinner." "You know her well intimately enough to dislike her." She smiled at me. "A woman can forgive everything in another woman except happiness." Poe accepted this as a statement of geography, not of ethics. "Yet you were once friends." "We were schoolgirls together." "She married dull security." "I married entertainment. We exchanged Christmas cards. And your perfume, madam, it is gardenia." She raised an eyebrow. "You have been sniffing my correspondence. Only your ribbon." Cora leaned forward, amused. "Yes, I use it. So does half of Bond Street. It was fashionable in Alice 3 years ago. I like the memory." Poirot's eyes lingered a moment on her hands. White, graceful, but faintly tremulous. "Do you know Mr. Julian de Miral?" "Know him?" She laughed. "I once tried to forget him. Why?" "He'd often with the Lintons. Julian din often with anyone who has silver cutlery and a forgiving husband." Her gaze hardened. "Is Alice Dister forgiving?" "Maybe too much. Then he'll have a long life." She expelled smoke in a narrow, careful ring. "Am I supposed to comprehend that I am a suspect in a crime?" "How tasty." "You sent a package yesterday," Poirot remarked. "I did," Cora said. "A cap for my sister in Surrey at the Berkeley Square post office." "At Berkeley Square, yes, Miss Poirot, you are quite inquisitive. If you like, I may email you a list of everything I post, including my bills." Poirot, smiling. "This will not be necessary. The tax officials do it already." She laughed again, but her eyes were tired. "What will happen now? You are watching me. You searched my dressing table." "No, madame. I keep track of who is watching you." He bowed again and went. "You believe she's guilty?" I asked as the lift descended. "I believe," Poirot said, "that she is too composed. When a lady is truly naive, she becomes furious rather than amused. When she feels guilty, she turns charming. She admits to the ribbon." That's clever. The guilty admit that what they believe cannot be proved. It makes the rest appear incredible. We will see. At lunch in Soho, Poirot unwrapped his napkin with surgical care. There is a missing piece, he explained. Our Lady of Gardenia had a motivation. Jealousy, but not an opportunity. She had no idea Mrs. Linton would open the box so quickly, unless she kept an eye on things, which she did. Who? The husband, perhaps, or our Yugoslav correspondent? What do you think of Julian Dyrell? I believe men who flatter everyone frequently deceive someone. We'll call him this afternoon and see if he disputes it. Then Poirot continued. He'd offer us Turkish smokes. The guilty always do. It gives them time to think. Julian Dyrell lived in rooms that overlooked Palm. The man himself was exactly what one would expect from a foreign correspondent before civilization collapsed. Handsome, insincere, and slightly overdrawn at his bank. He greeted us with a smile that had seen far too many cameras. Ah, Mr. Poe, I read about you in Paris. You pursued the diamond thieves with no honor. Poirot explained that the honor is reserved for those who are truthful. Are you acquainted with the Lintons? Of course. Sir Alistista is a wonderful man, and his wife. Adorable. Also, Poirot mentioned the Lady Cole Blount. A flicker, then a shrug. A good friend. Poirot joked that she is such a good friend that she sends chocolates to Mrs. Linton laced with arsenic. Dyrell just stared. That's absurd. Poirot confirmed this, which is why I bring it up. Absurdities. They are the fingerprints of guilt. The journalist spread his hands. I assure you, I know nothing of this. Then you will not object to telling me, said Poirot pleasantly. Why you telephoned Mrs. Linton at 8:15 yesterday evening? Dyrell blinked. How do you know that? It is my profession to know, said Poirot. You called to warn her or to ensure she stayed at home to receive a parcel. That is nonsense. Possibly, but nonsense interests me, monsieur. It is the shadow that the truth throws when it passes through a small mind. Dyrell rose abruptly. I think our interview is over. On the contrary, said Poirot, it is only beginning. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small folded paper, the note from the chocolate box. With love to you, and the little ones see you recognize the handwriting. Dyrell hesitated one fraction of a second too long. No, Poirot tucked it away. Then you will forgive me if I keep it a little longer. We walked back through St. James's Park as evening descended. London's lamps were lighting like disciplined stars. You think he's in it with Cora? I asked. I think, said Poirot, that someone wrote that note in imitation of her hand. It is clever but not perfect. The slant is masculine, the pressure heavy. The writer wished us to believe in a woman's jealousy. It is not jealousy. It is calculation. I frowned. Then how on earth did you know about that telephone call? You spoke as though you had overheard it yourself. Poe gave a little shrug, half amusement, half mischief. Mon ami, I knew nothing, but a man who has done no wrong will correct you. A man who fears discovery will defend himself before the accusation is complete. I spoke of a call, and our handsome journalist flinched. Therefore there was a call. You bluffed, but naturally the truth, Hastings, is like the electricity in the wireless. It will rush toward the point of least resistance. One must simply provide the wire. Then he did ring her. I should be astonished if he did not, said Poirot serenely, and still more astonished if Sir Alistista does not know it. He paused to adjust his hat against the chill breeze. The answer, mon ami, is often the one who insists on quiet. Tomorrow we shall speak again with Sir Alistista Linton. I think he has been listening to static on the wrong wireless. He smiled faintly. That private smile that means the little grey cells are already arranging chairs for the final act. Chapter 3, The Voice on the Wire. London woke that morning in a mood of grey civility. The rain had decided to remain indefinitely, and the city accepted it as it accepts Parliament without enthusiasm, but with obedience. Poe, whose temperament was never improved by damp, had installed himself in our sitting room at the Savoy, surrounded by toast, correspondence, and a view of umbrellas. He examined a small pile of telephone forms and calling cards, with the care of a jeweller assessing flawed diamonds. Observe, Hastings, he said, England's most perfect invention. The polite delay, letters that say nothing, cards that mean less. One might almost suspect the English of murdering only to avoid conversation. You're in a fine mood this morning, I said. Are we seeing Sir Alistista? Presently. First a little experiment. He tapped the bell. When the waiter appeared, Poirot requested a copy of the Morning Post and the use of the hotel telephone. I wish to make a call, he explained, but not to speak. I have long since ceased to ask why Poirot does things. He took the receiver, dialed a number, and let the line ring exactly 3 times before hanging up. Voila the truth. She is already travelling. To whom did you telephone? To Sir Alistair Linton's study, said Poirot. He will now wonder who knows his private number. Guilt, my friend, is like a wireless signal. It crackles even when one pretends not to listen. We were received that afternoon in the Lintons' drawing room, where the faint odour of disinfectant had replaced the sweeter perfume of the previous day. Margaret was better, sitting up, pale but composed, her eyes shadowed like porcelain cups. The nurse was absent. The footman had withdrawn. Even Lady Rosund had the air of a spectator who suspects the next act will not flatter her. Sir Alistair stood by the hearth, tall, narrow, precise, a man who seemed to belong to a blueprint rather than to a wife. He greeted Poirot with impeccable courtesy, then turned to me as though calculating my relevance. You wish to see me, Marot? If you please, said Poirot. It concerns a telephone call. The pause was very slight indeed. Last evening a call was made to this house shortly before the arrival of the parcel. A man's voice. The exchange records a connection from Pall Mall, Mr. Julian Dirrell's rooms. Sir Alistair's fingers tightened upon the back of a chair. And you have verified this? Poirot inclined his head. The operator remembers the call. A foreign accent, she said, and the words, "Tell Mrs. Linton to remain at home. It is important." A strange instruction to accompany a gift of chocolates. Margaret stirred faintly. Then Julian knew. He knew it was coming. Or, said Poirot, someone wished you to think he did. Sir Alistair's gaze fixed on Poirot with a steadiness that might have intimidated a smaller man. You appear to have made up your mind. Not yet, said Poirot gently. I am still listening to the static. Lady Rosund, who had been hovering like an anxious bird, broke in. Well, surely it is obvious. Cora sent the chocolates. Demerel posted them. And poor Margaret nearly died for their folly. Poirot raised a small reproving hand. Obvious, madame, is the word one writes before discovering one is wrong. He crossed to the mantel, examining a small radio set of military precision. Sir Alistair, this apparatus belongs to you. Yes, Admiral Tiework. It's capable of overseas transmission and encryption. Sir Alistair stiffened. Naturally, Poirot nodded slowly, curious. There are 2 types of message that require secrecy, those concerning governments and those concerning hearts. Both are frequently intercepted. Margaret gave a faint smile. You think our marriage a matter of state? Poirot bowed. For some, madame, it is an occupation. She looked away. Alistair, I did not tell you. The telephone rang again this morning. I answered. The line was open, but there was no voice. Only the faintest hum, as if someone were listening. Sir Alistair turned sharply. You should have called me. I was tired of calling you, she said softly. There was silence then, a silence so brittle one could hear the weight of it settling upon the carpet. Paul, with great delicacy, restored the receiver to its hook. Outside the fog had thickened. We walked slowly toward Piccadilly. Our collars turned up against the wet. Well, I said at last, he looked guilty enough for 3 men. We, said Poirot, to guilty. Guilt that wishes to be seen is often fear of something smaller, embarrassment perhaps. You think he's innocent? I think he is an engineer. He hides behind facts as others hide behind furs. But there was something in Madame Linton's words, a line that hummed as she said, a line that connects her to the man who telephoned. Julian Dirrell perhaps, or perhaps to the person who wished us to think it was he. He halted suddenly beneath the street lamp, the rain silvering his hat. Gardenia Hastings, he said abruptly. Did you notice it? I sniffed. No, I did. On the telephone table, very faint, but not Margaret Linton's scent. Hers is rosewater. Someone had handled the receiver before her. You mean? I mean, said Poirot, that the murderer need not have sent the poison by post at all. He or she may have personally brought it and left a fragrance as a signature. That evening, back at the Savoy, we received a message from Cora Blount, Park Lane. Message. Please quit sniffing my scent. This is not a crime, signed. C.B. Poirot read it again and folded it carefully. You see, Hastings, when you rattle the wire, the snakes start moving. He poured himself a little glass of crème de meaux and looked at it, as if expecting wisdom. Tomorrow we'll go to the shop where the box was purchased. If my little grey cells are correct, the Gardenia trail will become stronger there, and perhaps Hastings, we may discover whose voice genuinely spoke over the line. He raised his glass in a gentle salute. 2 phones, my pal, and the modern confessional. Chapter 4, The Man in the Mirror. Poirot despises untidy shops even more than untidy crimes. The next morning, we found ourselves standing in Blanchard and Company, a discreet confectioner just off Grosvenor Street, where the aroma of cocoa mixed with the sound of quiet dignity. Behind the counter, a clerk with a delicate form and fair complexion polished the glass, as if terrified of his own image. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Mousse blanche, I assume. Yes, sir. The man spoke English with an exiled accent, possibly Swiss. How may I help you? Poirot recalled that a package like this cream card with green silk ribbon had been purchased here within the last week. Blanchard examined it and then nodded. Certainly a regular customer, and a lady of refinement. She brought her own ribbon. This is unique, yet we oblige our clients. Do you recollect her name? She didn't give it. He paid in cash, but his gaze shifted to the rear shelves. I recall her being special. We requested gardenia creams. Said they reminded her of Capri. Poirot's mustaches flicked up. Capri. That Hastings is already an admission of style. She waited as we packed them. Blanchard carried on. She then changed her mind about the delivery and took the parcel herself. Describe her, if you please. Blanchard pursed his lips. Tallish, well-dressed, fair, but there was another thing, the man thought. A man waiting outside in a car. I remember because he honked impatiently. Describe him too. Dark hair, about 40, appeared alien, and the face was narrow. Poodle bent slightly. You are a keen observer, monsieur, my thanks. He spoke quietly as we exited into the brisk morning. Hastings, the picture comes together on its own. The Lady Cora undoubtedly purchases the box. The gentleman Miraval is waiting outside. But if they conspired, why the secrecy? And if he was uninformed, why would he join her? You assume they quarreled? Or rehearsed, Poirot remarked softly. Murder-like drama demands practice. By midday, the newspapers were murmuring that a society woman had been poisoned by a parcel. Names were still concealed, but the description was detailed enough that anyone with a curiosity and an address book could fill in the gaps. Pooh read the piece with a raised eyebrow. Who do you suppose leaked it? I asked. Poirot tapped the margin. The person who requires sympathy, guilt. Hastings enjoys the sound of public pity. It makes its chains feel decorative. We had just completed lunch on when the telephone rang. Poirot responded, listening without expression. Yes, I do understand. Inform her that I'll be there right away. He replaced the receiver. That was Lady Rosand. Cora Blount has left. Where did they go? Her maid reports that she left after breakfast with 2 luggage and a brooch, shaped like discretion. The maid discovered a note. I'm tired of gossip. I go where nobody can find me. Naturally, everyone will try to find her right away. Do you believe the note? Poirot said every phrase since none of them were true. We arrived at Cora's flat around 2. The apartment had the mournful feeling of rooms that were once intelligent, but are now vacant. A faint scent of gardenia lingered, mingled with the odor of extinguished cigarettes. Poirot proceeded from the vanity table to the writing desk with his usual caution. Observe, he mumbled, the powder puff still open and the lipstick uncapped. A lady who departs unexpectedly does not make time for such farewells. He retrieved a silver-framed portrait from the mantel. Julien de Mural is smiling in front of an automobile. The lowest corner bore a little, slightly oily fingerprint. Poirot smiled. Voila, our passenger. 2 ripped parts of an envelope postmarked Capri were found in the waste-paper basket. Poirot put them together. Inside, there are a few lines of fine Italian and a Arlington signature. Who is that? I asked. Poirot frowned his brow. A borrowed name, perhaps. In 1935, there was an engineer of that name who worked with Admiral Tighe. Dead for 2 years now. A curious pick for a correspondent reporting from Capri. But why counterfeit a deceased person's hand? Because, mon ami, a letter from the living elicits a response. A letter from the dead inspires terror. He placed the letter on the dressing table and turned to face the mirror above it. Regarding Hastings. A mirror, it has been moved. The marks on the wall are slightly higher now. She stood on the chair to move it. Why? I shrugged. To boost the lighting. Poirot shook his head. What about the light? Yes, but not on her face. For the reflection on the door. A woman is afraid and wants to observe who enters before they see her. Someone arrived yesterday whom she did not trust. Lady Rosamond stormed in, followed by an efficient constable. "Miss Poe, you must help us. They say she has departed England." Poirot replied calmly, "She won't have gone far. A woman who travels to avoid gossip does not abandon her hat boxes. She travels for or with the company." Lady Rosamond blinked under it. Poirot suggested that he might be in disguise, or under a different name. "You'll see, Hastings. Cora Blount is about to become famous for being invisible." The constable coughed. "Excuse me, sir, but the porter in the building next door noticed a lady matching this description entering Mr. D'Erville's chambers shortly after lunch." Pooh's demeanor remained unchanged, but a gleam appeared in his eye. The mirror reveals the man. Come, Hastings, we will call on him again. I believe this time he will prefer the truth." Julian Darrell was not in the mood for guests. He opened the door half an inch, then fully, and motioned us inside with the hesitant hospitality of a man who understands that friendliness can be deadly. "You again," he replied. "I suppose you've come to accuse me of kidnapping now." Menon greeted Poirot kindly, simply asking if the lady with the gardenia scent had arrived safely. Darrell just stared. "You mean Cora? She's in Paris," said Poirot. "Then she learnt to fly, as she was sighted entering this building less than an hour earlier." He laughed too fast. "Ridiculous." "Quite," Poirot replied. "And still there is her smell obvious upon your stare." He made a little turn. "I assume you smoke Turkish cigarettes, yes? Then you cannot have the trace of gardenia." Poirot grinned pleasantly. "Monsieur, I recommend that while hiding a lady, choose a scent that is less eager to confess." Darrell's hand jerked towards his pocket. Poirot's eyes followed it carefully. "There's no need for melodrama. We'll locate her shortly, perhaps in the back room where the curtains are drawn." Darrell froze and then stepped aside. "Go ahead," he urged to harassingly. "You'll see for yourself." We entered the inner room. It was small and dim, with a faint fragrance. Gardenia reappears, but now mixed with something metallic. Cora Blount lay on the chaise, immaculately dressed, her skin pale as porcelain, and her eyes closed in what appeared to be a rehearsal for eternity. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "The lady who wanted to be remembered has succeeded." Darrell leaned against the doorframe, her face chalky white. I swear I didn't. She arrived here this morning, agitated and babbling about flight. She drank brandy and collapsed. I assumed she'd fainted." Poirot bent over the glass on the side table, sniffing softly before turning to face me. "Smell, Hastings." It was unmistakable, the bitter almond flavor of cyanide. "She took it herself," I whispered. Poirot said perhaps, but I believe not. He pointed to the opposite mirrored wardrobe. "The lock is broken from within. She fought with the tumbler of brandy. Examine the rim. 2 prints, one tiny, one huge." He looked back at Darrell. "For sure you should reveal the truth before someone else does." Darrell's shoulders slumped. "I did not kill her," he murmured. "But I know who did it." Pooh looked at him for a long time. "Yes," he replied softly. "So do I. It was done through reflection." Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds hung pale and uncommitted over the city. Poirot raised his cap to the constable who arrived below. I inquired, "Where are we going now?" Poirot addressed Sir Alistair. "It is time for the truth to face itself in the mirror." Chapter 5. A Hand in the Dark. The scandal lasted precisely 3 days. On the 4th, the London papers concluded that society's appetite had been satisfied and moved to racing results. Nothing more was said about Cora Blount, except that she had died unexpectedly at the home of a friend. Society, like a cat, buried its waste neatly and returned to purring. However, Poirot never buries. He was standing by the Savoy window, the grey light pouring over his pristine figure, when he murmured, "There are crimes, Hastings, that are not committed with weapons, but with gestures. One wave of a hand, one letter, one glance, and the heart takes care of the rest." I'd learnt not to interrupt such contemplation. He then added, "Miss Blouse, vanity has left a trail more evident than blood. We will proceed with caution, as vanity bruises easily." That afternoon, we visited on Margaret Linton. She greeted us in the drawing-room, pale and stately, her demeanor that of someone who has exhausted sadness and now uses quiet as a sort of courage. "You mentioned a letter," she said immediately. "My husband says it was nothing, but it haunts me." Poirot inquired whether it had arrived via usual post. Yes, it appeared to have arrived from Italy, 2 days before the chocolates and was written in a stranger's hand. It mentioned Capri and a rendezvous that I couldn't remember. Celestista read it, grew pale, and torched it before I could stop him. Poirot nodded slowly. And yet, madame, the twin of that letter was in Miss Blount's drawer. She kept the draft, much as vain women retain mirrors. The document was English, but the postmark was counterfeit. It was not an admirer who wrote to you, but she intended to stab 2 hearts at once. Your husband was her past, and you were her adversary, and she wanted to see both of them flinch. Margaret stared at him. Then she still loved him. Poirot spoke softly. She loved herself through him. It is a subtler disease. He paused to study her face. Miss Blount became concerned when the poisoning failed. Not of justice, but of derision. She had intended to create a sensation, not a controversy. She telephoned Sir Alistista and asked him to come, but she also called Julien de Miral, the journalist who previously complimented her in print before abandoning her for fresher conversation. She needed witnesses, madame, and an audience for the scene she was going to perform. Poirot's recollection of that evening came later, when we went down the embankment, and the fog rose from the river like used perfume. She arrived at Muir de Miral's Palm residence shortly before 9. He claimed he received her grudgingly. Some men fear tears more than bullets. She insisted that he speak for her and tell the world that she was innocent of the poisoning. He tried to calm her with brandy, but she was not a woman to be placated. She was a woman to be observed. Then came a knock. Sir Alistair entered. I paused. He followed her there. Exactly. That afternoon she wrote a few melodramatic phrases that got him running. And so they met, the lover, the spouse, and the lady who wanted to punish both. De Miral, confronted with reality rather than romanticism, retreated to the corridor. He heard increased voices, laughter, and then silence. When he returned, she was laying on the floor with the brandy glass beside her. Did he observe Alistista depart? He said not, but the porter did. A man in a dark coat, hat pulled low, rushes out through the service door. A gentleman's escape, discreet but recognizable. We went to see Sir Alistista that evening. The shades were drawn, and the wireless buzzed softly like a conscience refusing to be turned off. He stood beside the mantelpiece, one hand resting on it as if to balance. "You have come to blame me," he murmured, tilting his head. "I understand you, monsieur. Accusation is a legal concept, whereas comprehension is a spiritual one." The man's face was drawn, his eyes shaded by sleeplessness. "She called me," he replied after a pause. She was furious, saying she was going to tell Margaret everything, and that I had wrecked her. I went to get her to stop talking. When I got there, she was with Daryl. She smiled as he departed, saying she had made me twice as jealous. She poured brandy, taunting me all the time. I attempted to take it from her. She drank it to spite me. Then she fell. He gazed at Poirot almost imploringly. "I did not touch her. I assumed she'd fainted." I waited, then I lost my nerve. "Cowardice," Poirot gently observed, "is sometimes the only virtue left to the respectable." Sir Alistista's shoulders sagged. "Tell Margaret the truth, then." "I can't." Poirot shook his head. "No truth, such as confessions, must be conveyed in the first person." We strolled back through streets smelling of wet stone and gaslight. London was already forgetful. Poirot didn't. He walked carefully, cap pulled low, coat collar turned up against the precipitation. So I said, "Cora fabricated the letter to inflame jealously, delivered the chocolates to punish her competitor, and died of her own theatre." He nodded. Hastings gave 3 performances, each one more fatal than the last. The spouse who mistook silence for strength, the lover who ran at the first scream, and the woman who preferred applause above love itself. They created a tragedy with no villain, only vanity. He paused beneath a street lighting, its light quivering on the damp pavement. "You see, mon ami, the heart is the best dramatist of all. It practices cruelty till the curtain falls. That is why I call it a hand in the dark. You never know who it will strike or whether it is your own." He adjusted his tie one more time, a gesture that always signifies the end. "Come, Hastings. There is only one stage left, reflection, which may be the most difficult. Chapter 6, The Ultimate Reflection. From Hercule's Private Journal, Savoy Hotel, London, April 1938. It is finished. Outside my window, the temperature glitters like a long mirror in which London examines its conscience and finds it acceptable. Respectability, mon ami, is the best disguise. Envy, misery, loneliness, and even murder can be found beneath it, but desire is never honestly confessed. The English commit their crimes while drinking their tea quietly, preferably without witnesses. Cora Blount wasn't evil. She was vain, which is far more common and much more dangerous. Vanity wants an audience. When rejected, it creates one. She penned an unsent letter from Capri and sent it to a lady she envied, summoning the ghosts of two men who had never actually lived for her. One fled, one observed, and she died in the space between them. They will all survive her. That is England's ability to survive while being emotionally detached. Sir Alistair will be censured, but not annihilated. Admiral T will quietly retire him to the countryside, where repentance can be rehearsed on the golf course. Madame Linton will attend charity committee meetings with the serenity that truth has purchased. Monsieur Dayrell will write an article about moral cowardice and be applauded for his insight. Only I shall remember a woman who died from gardinas and injured pride. I've always said that when love loses its humility, it becomes theatrical. And while theatre can be enjoyable, it is not life. It is a rehearsal for tragedy. This case has reminded me that the mirror is the most merciless of detectives. It reveals who we are, rather than what we have been accused of. Cora stared too long into hers, seeing only the past. Alistair refused to look and did not see anything. Between those two blind spots lies the measure of human foolishness. I polished my own mirror tonight. It reflects an elderly man who still believes that order exists despite the disorder of the heart. Perhaps I'm wrong, but the small grey cells prefer symmetry, so I'll give them a rest. Tomorrow I'll eat late breakfast, get the 9 Roy paper, and read about the races at Ascot. The world will have moved on. The theatre is closed. The scent of gardenia remains faint and insolent, as memory always does. Hercule Poirot, music. And so ends Poirot and the Mirror of Jealousy, a story of envy and illusion in which love, pride, and appearance met their reflections and found the truth too painful to bear. We wrote this story in homage to Agatha Christie, inspired by the true story of Cordelia Botkin and the darker side of human vanity. However, the voice, setting, and all details are entirely our own creation. If you listen to the end,